Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the Jo number HRP-1-626. This is a hinge reinforcing plate is what this is. That's what it looks like right out of the package. This is a really inexpensive version of these. These puppies can get easily 3 times the cost, at least at the time of making this video. And they can be the salvation of a door frame, of salvaging a door and frame installation where all else has failed, meaning the door has discontinued working properly. Okay, completely non-handed and fully reversible. Okay. Without a doubt at all. So what we've got working here is obviously going to be an installation where you've got what would probably be a right-hand reverse door. You want to reverse that, you're going to remove that bolt, shift it over here. Now you're going to be on. Now you're going to be over here. Okay. Let's take a look at it deeper. And let's start that with a visual tour of the hardware itself. Okay, so this is going to be the header portion, and it would be normal that they're not flush because typical hollow metal doors and frames, which is where these are really used, that door is inset into the frame ever so slightly, like 3/32 of an inch. I rarely see these installed in new installations, but I do occasionally. There's a national fast food chain that uses these on new installations, or at least I've seen them in my area. And I think it's probably because they realize that in 5 years' time that top hinge is going to fatigue, or I should say the hinge reinforcement in the door and frame will fatigue, and this is an insurance policy right away, immediately. Because what happens is, and where you're going to use these, is when the hinge plate in the top of the frame or the door fails, fatigues, breaks, snaps, gives way to rust. The top hinge is doing the majority of the load of carrying the door. It generally carries 70% of the door, I understand, that top hinge alone. And depending on the quality of the door and frame, the thickness of the steel, whether or not it was galvanized, the way that it's constructed, you could have a hinge plate reinforcement fail rather prematurely if it's a low quality door. Well, if it's a door that is of thin gauge steel, you can't weld as deeply enough. Economy will kick in and you're not going to have the thickness of steel anywhere. So what this really does is forces the door to stay proud or plumb in the opening, not putting that lateral pressure as you open the door and you grab the door and you pull it. Well, all the pressure, all that force, the majority of force is going to be absolutely on that top hinge every single time that it happens. And that sort of normal operation where the hinge plate in the frame and the door is not only carrying the overwhelming majority of the weight of the door, but the forces of it acting really stress that stuff a lot. And that's why you're going to see continuous hinges in new installations, especially in schools. But you know, a client will say, yeah, the door's really sagging, and then they'll say, I think there's a broken weld. And you start to investigate and penetrate that conversation further. Indeed, that's what the case is. So what we really like to do is to be able to, we make a living selling doors and frames, but we also don't replace all 4 tires on the car if one of them has a nail in it. So you fix that problem, and that's what this piece of hardware is really intended to do. Now, this is going to be made of steel. This is going to have a corrosion-resistant zinc plating on it. We demonstrated how it's non-handed, and the one that I'm showing you here is certainly going to be what from your perspective would be a right-hand reverse. The hinges are on the right side of your opening, and the door swings towards you. There is a link to a document called Template that will allow you to review all of the dimensional properties of the item, so we'll just touch on it quickly in terms of some overall sizes. They've got 3 5/8 overall width. I'd come up with that being accurate. Let's go with an overall height of 3 3/8 overall height. The bottom plate, about 1 5/8. Okay. Overall projection off the face of the header at least is about 1 1/16. Okay. When you apply this up onto the door and frame, you'll quickly realize that they are indeed handed, but this design is smart enough to be able to allow you to stock one item and to make it work. And if you are a locksmith, installer, someone who goes out and works in your client base's condo associations, and they have trouble with doors where they're hitting in the top of the door, get the door put back in the opening, shim it correctly. Make sure that you've got proper margin, especially on the hinge side. Get that placed up there, and obviously you're going to be locating this so that this is on the header portion and this is on the door portion, and that 1/8 of an inch between the two there, that's going to be the gap between the door and frame, and you're going to mark those holes. Okay, you're going to center punch those holes, and you're going to then do a reality check that you've got everything accurate. You're then going to pre-drill the holes, and you'll attach everything. Now, obviously, all they're giving us here is probably a number 12 flathead screw that would otherwise be a hinge screw, and it could be quite devilish for you to be able to get this plate installed into the header, especially if it's been pumped with mortar, which in the header is not so necessarily something that you'll bump into all the time. And if you're doing a new installation, have someone put in a piece of white styrofoam in the throat of the frame and put some tape on it so that when the mason sets the frame in place and pours mortar in there, that you've got a cavity where you can drill into and run the screws, because if you're going to try to pre-drill and you're hitting mortar, it's going to be pretty tough. You go through some drill bits doing that as well. Now, in terms of the door portion, I'm obviously not thrilled with the fact that they didn't give us sex bolts for the door portion. And what I would certainly do would be strongly consider purchasing sex bolts to go along with them. You know, sheet metal screws, you know, they're you know, if your door gauge is already thin, you might purchase some sex bolts. I will make sure that there's a link down below this video to those as well, so that you can pick those up. Obviously, the frame, you're not going to be able to do anything through bolting that, obviously. I'll tell you, though, what some other people do, and I don't recommend it, but you use the tool that you're most comfortable with. So I've got a lot of experience welding, and I've welded stuff together before that other people would drill and tap. You probably could throw that down with some weld, too, though. Maintaining it down the road, obviously, will probably be somebody else's problem, but you can get in there with a die grinder and generally cut the welds. But I'll make sure that there's a link below this video to the sex bolts. Now, they literally indicate in their comment field that there are 2 each included, but there are 0 each included with this, which is sometimes par for the course. So a summary of the item: when you have a fatigued top hinge location, the fact that you are going to securely mount these 8 holes to the door and frame, and this vertical axis of pivoting is going to be the same vertical axis of pivoting as all the hinges on the door, and you're going to leave that top hinge and maybe do a little bit of mitigation to that. If you can drill and then maybe draw it tight and plug weld it, you know, you'll leave that hinge up there because, you know, repair it if you can, because you're probably doing a repair to begin with. Okay, so that's where you're going to use it. You're going to continue to get useful service out of the door when it's not utterly failed and fatigued. The installation time of this will hopefully be an hour. I could see it being longer depending on how much you have to fight to pre-drill the holes. But for the cost, you're certainly going to be getting a significant amount of additional time out of the installation. And if this is a dock door, if this is a trash compartment door, if this is something on the back of a strip mall where no one's going to see that piece of hardware, or if you want to even then paint this to match the existing door and frame, I don't see why you would do anything else, is my opinion. There's also a link below this video to a document called Product Catalog, which is very handy as well, because it will allow you to review all of the hinges from Donjo, of which, of course, this reinforcing plate is considered part and parcel of. Now, they make more than one of these. This is the HRP-1, and they list them as handed. They're not handed. They have an LHR and an RHR. They're now all non-handed. But the important part is this is different than the HRP-2 because it has a 3/4 inch a pivot offset. You have to be mindful of knowing what the pivot offset is so that your vertical axis of pivoting, measured from the face of the door, is the offset. So the face of the door to the vertical axis of the pin is your offset. And you're going to want to be sure that you're ordering the proper version of that, because there can be more than one. If you're dealing with a common hollow metal door and frame, that's 3/4 inch. That's the one you want. You could have a 1/2 inch offset, and you know where you'll see that is if you have an aluminum storefront door and you have 4.5 by 4 inch hinges. That could be an explanation of where you're going to see that shorter offset. 4.5 tall by 4 inch wide hinges are common on aluminum storefront, but not common at all on hollow metal doors and frame. Put your tape measure to the face of the door, go to the center line of the hinge barrel, that's your offset. Helps to repair and prevent sagging doors. That's the description, and that's what it does. Finally, there's a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all of the Don Jo products that we sell, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. The name Don Jo is synonymous with door reinforcing wraparound plates primarily, but also with latch protectors. But when you look at all those other catalogs, you're going to quickly realize that they're a comprehensive provider of all things trim and auxiliary hardware related. And I'm partial to Don Jo, and it's because they do a good job. They earn our consideration and others because they are prompt, reliable, predictable. Their technical support is good. Their customer service is very good. The rare occasion that there's a mistake, they make it good immediately, that sort of stuff. And they've got a good quality product at a very fair price. And a lot of their line is also made in the United States as well. If you have any questions on the Don Jo HRP-1 hinge reinforcing pivot or any other Don Jo product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you.